what's up?
One thing that I absolutely love about TikTok is that it opens you up to the outside world. Things that are normal but you don't usually see. Do not judge me, but I just found out that summer camps were real. Like the cabins and outdoor activities and lakes. I just thought it was some Parent Trap folklore. Please do not judge me again, but we learn something new every day, and when I saw that it actually existed, I was just pretty shocked. And then I got a little sad because it looks pretty fun, and then I saw this video and realized I grew up poor.
Have you ever wondered how much those sleepaway camps that rich people send their kids to every summer actually cost? Here are 10 of the most expensive and prestigious summer camps in the United States. This first sleepaway camp is one of the hardest to get your kids into. Racket Lake Camps. It's also one of the oldest camps in the United States. They have activities like sailing and boating, dance class, gymnastics, a ropes course. This camp screams wealthy people only. You don't just enroll your kid in the summer camp. There is a process because choosing Racket Lake is like choosing a private school. We want to know all RLC families, so it's important that we take the time to meet with you in your home via chat or when you come to tour camp. This 6-week camp costs $16,250. This cost almost as much as my 2-year master's program. Next, we have Camp Pontiac. You maybe have heard about this one because they're pretty active on social media. They also have activities like gymnastics, pottery, zip lining. They have a STEM program, circus training. Yes, circus training. Theater, wakeboarding, modeling. They have ninja warrior stuff. They also have snorkeling. Depending on when you enroll, you're either paying $14,750 or $15,750.
I wish I grew up rich, but either way, it somehow led me down a rabbit hole of behavior conversion camps. A program where troubled teens get legally kidnapped and sent to the woods to fix their behavior.
My parents hired kidnappers and sent me to live in the wilderness for 4 months.
Which honestly just sounds like a humbling experience, but in reality, these kids are getting shipped off by their parents in the most unhinged, chaotic way possible. They're getting snatched out their bed in the middle of the night by randoms and sent to a remote camp with no warning, no explanation, and no hearsay. Netflix dropped a documentary exposing how these troubled teen camps started getting traction back in the 80s. And then it made me wonder, what was these kids doing in the 80s? Apparently, parents were overwhelmed. Some genuinely didn't know how to deal with their kids acting out. So they got sold on this idea that sending them away to these programs would help, that they'd get therapy and the structure to come back a better person. But what actually happened was the complete opposite. These kids were stripped of their rights, isolated from their families, while being subjected to emotional, verbal, and sometimes physical abuse. These camps are supposed to be healing, and the therapy was just a literal joke. Instead, they used fear and manipulation to break the kids down. I don't know whose bright idea it was to snatch the kids in the middle of the night and force them to get in a car and drive 60 hours or fly 5 hours to some deserted area in Idaho. Like, why must you make these kids feel like they're being kidnapped? I don't understand that. Why is that necessary? And it sounds like a horrible way to start off an already horrible experience.
5,779 days ago, I was taken out of my bedroom in the middle of the night by 2 strangers. I had no idea that my parents had hired them to come and take me. I was 17 years old, I was asleep in bed at my parents' house, and I had school in the morning when a sound woke me up. I grabbed my cell phone that was next to my pillow. It was like an LG orange brick phone. I saw that it said it was 4 a.m. I put my phone down, I rolled over and went back to sleep. The lights came on in my room and there were 2 total strangers standing there. I reached for my phone, it was gone. At first I was completely panicked, frozen, I couldn't scream, but then eventually I started screaming and nobody came. They wouldn't let me get off my bed because they thought maybe I had a weapon somewhere and they wanted to keep me in the bed, and they were like, "Where are your sweatpants? Where's your shirt?" I was screaming at this point and they were physically holding me onto the bed because I was doing my best to get off, and they ripped my comforter. They gave me 2 options. They said you can act civil in an airport or you can go in the car and we can drive like 60 hours or something crazy like that. I picked the airport because in my head I was like thinking really fast. I was like, there's going to be people at the airport, let's go there so then I can scream and they'll actually hear me. When we got to the airport, they took me in the back of the TSA questioning room because I was causing a scene. I tried to explain to the woman interviewing me that I didn't know who these people were and I didn't know where they were taking me. She didn't seem too concerned, but she left and came back and was like, "Okay, you're free to go." I was like, "Yes, thank God I get to go home." I walked out of the room and no, she meant you're free to go on your flight with the strangers.
So as you can guess, the hygiene practices for these programs were the bottom of the barrel. Some kids didn't even have access to basic necessities for days or weeks. No clean clothes, no proper bathrooms, and definitely no dignity. And if you complained, that was just seen as more bad behavior to punish. It's wild how these places marketed themselves as a healing environment when in reality they couldn't even provide soap.
What would you do if you were kidnapped in the night and you found out your parents orchestrated it?
So yeah, if you don't know the story about me yet, That happened to me when I was 15. I was kidnapped, they call it getting gooned, by two large men and taken to the airport, put on a plane, and sent to Utah to go to a wilderness therapy program for 3.5 months. I had no idea. I literally thought I was being abducted because my parents obviously didn't communicate that with me. Nobody was at our house. Like, they literally just came in and they're like, "You're coming with us. We have your parents' consent." And I literally thought I was being like trafficked and abducted. But no, I was just being sent to the wilderness. I was there for 3.5 months. Lived outside, never went indoors. We had to pee and poop in holes. We had no toilets. When we used the restroom, we had to put our toilet paper in a gallon Ziploc bag and carry our dirty toilet paper in our backpack for 3.5 months. We got a shower every other week, and it wasn't even a real shower. We would put up a tarp, stand behind it, and we would boil water over our fire that we had to learn to make ourselves. Side story, I got put on, I guess, like probation because I couldn't bust a fire. So I wasn't allowed to have warm meals. Mind you, this was the middle of January in Utah. Freezing cold temperatures. So I had to eat cold food. Couldn't be with the group. Completely isolated from the friends that I had made because I wasn't good at busting a fire. That's what it's called, busting a fire. But I ended up getting it. But anyways, we would boil water on top of the fire that we built. And then you would go and stand behind the tarp. And they gave you this tiny washcloth. Literally, I'm telling you guys, this big. Not even like a washcloth, like not even a hand towel, like a legit 4x4, I don't know the dimensions, washcloth. And you could decide how you wanted to use it. Never got washed, never got cleaned. So you could either, one, stand on it and pour the water over your head, and then air dry, even though it's freezing cold, and then put your clothes back on. Or you could stand on the dirt, pour it over your head, and then use the washcloth to dry your body off. But then your feet would be like muddy and dirty, and you'd have to put that back into your socks, which was awful. So I would always just air dry. We got not new clothes, but like they'd do like a laundry service for us or whatever. Like a big truck would come and like take our stuff and drop off new food and stuff like that. But we would change clothes once a week, and we would have like burnt holes in all of our outfits from the fire. And when we slept at night, we didn't have a tent. We didn't go indoors. Like, I'm literally telling you, I did not go inside anything for 3.5 months, completely outside. So we would sleep in these little things we called wigs, which are sleeping bags. And freezing cold, they'd take your shoes at night. So if you had to go use the restroom, you would step on a bunch of cactus and things like that. Like, my dad spent hours pulling thorns and cactus particles out of my feet when I got home. What else? Yeah, you had to call your name when you go use the restroom. Like, it was just absolute torture. We would hike every single day for 7 to 10 miles in the snow up to our knees. And we were all 12 to 16-year-old girls. What else? We would have to do feet checks to see if we had frostbite every 2 hours to make sure that no one's foot was going to fall off. That's how cold it was. We couldn't talk to our parents. We couldn't call them. We could write them letters, but they would have to read them and approve them. And if we said anything about us being like abused or like the conditions that we were living in, they would not send it to our parents, and we had no idea. What else? We didn't have any like real food. Everything was like dehydrated, like astronaut food. Yeah, it was pretty much the worst thing I've ever experienced. Very mentally abusive. I can't really go into all of that right now, but don't send your kids. Don't do it.
Having to carry your dirty poop tissues is just traumatizing within itself. There's just so many questions, like how did they wash their hands? How did they function on their period? If they only got to shower once every other week? There's a lot of questions to be answered, but the biggest one has to be the boundaries and how these people in charge of the kids conduct themselves. Having power over these kids and humiliating them by putting them in weird circumstances that totally crosses several lines. What's supposed to be a healing experience is met with hostility. And that type of vibe remains the entire duration of their experience. Behavior correction meant isolation and slowly breaking the kid's spirit in order to comply.
Parents are having their children abducted, taken against their will to a behavior modification program.
1 month before my 17th birthday, I was kidnapped by 2 women, forced into a vehicle, and driven hours south across the border and down into Mexico. Sometime later, the car entered a large compound, and I was dragged into a building, into a shower stall area, and stripped and a strip search was performed on me in front of 3 strangers. I was then forced to place my hand inside of myself to show that I did not have anything. I was not bringing anything in. I was horrified. That doesn't even cover it. I had no idea where I was. I had no idea who these people were. They wouldn't talk to me. They were laughing, talking with each other. I was taken to a bunk room with other girls who were already asleep, and I was told not to speak to anyone until I was told to. Hi, my name is Talon Majors, and I survived over a year at the horrific boarding school called Casa by the Sea. Being outside of the country meant anything went. Girls were forced into a set of rules, including having to earn underwear, speech. Those who resisted were hogtied, sat on, face down in dark rooms for entire days, sometimes weeks at a time. Those girls who chose to comply were encouraged to abuse their lower levels. Mind you, we did not have cell phones or anything like that back then, and we had no access to a landline, and the letters that we wrote on computer were altered and severely edited or had things redacted before they were sent to our parents. The facilities were dilapidated, in a complete shambles. There were no windows on the walls. We had no idea where we were, any current events going on in politics, none of that. We had no access to TV, anything. In the one classroom where there was a window, if we were caught looking out of it, we could be charged with the most serious offense there and be sent to room restraints. There were riots on the boys' side. If we didn't comply, we were threatened with being sent to Jamaica, which was apparently an even worse program. I can't explain in enough depth the lasting impact this place had on me. Kids died in these facilities, causing them to be investigated and eventually shut down. Friends of mine killed themselves when they left. Others ended up in prison, on drugs, worse. When my friend told me about the documentary at Ivy Ridge, I am so happy that we are finally exposing this, because back in the day, 120 families joined a lawsuit, but because of the politicians that had their hands in these schools, it was dropped after 6 years.
The entire industry is barely regulated, and it made millions off of scared parents while kids came out traumatized, not fixed. Now, years later, the survivors are finally speaking out. Paris Hilton is the great-granddaughter of Conrad Hilton, the founder of Hilton Hotels. She was born into one of the most well-known and wealthy families in America. She spent much of her early life in the spotlight of high society. By the late 90s and early 2000s, she became known as a socialite. To the public, she was the ultimate rich party girl, famous for being famous. But behind all the glitz, her home life was pretty strict. Her parents, especially her mother, Kathy, were focused on controlling her image and behavior. But in this instance, I could see where it was coming from, because Paris was wildin'. And being a part of the Hilton empire, you can't be in the media for your chaotic, drunk nightlife.
My mother would be up all night, calling every nightclub, threatening them.
I think I just got addicted to the nightlife. I felt accepted. I just felt like the queen of the night. And that's where I really became Paris.
I locked her in the room. I was afraid she could run into a predator, get kidnapped. Fear, to me, is the most powerful feeling there is. Fear. More than pain, more than love, more than hate, more than like, more than fear. And I thought this was the worst mistake ever moving here. I gotta get her out of here.
I was just a kid living in New York, going to high school. Obviously ditching a lot of class, whatever, but I feel like my parents were scared and they didn't want their reputations to be ruined, because Page Six was writing all these stories. So I felt like I was just kind of just sent away to be hidden.
All you ever wanted was the best for your child.
I first sent her to an outdoor wilderness program.
It's for teenage boys and girls needing a change of attitude and direction.
There's all these places called emotional growth schools. The first place was in the middle of nowhere. We were building other camps, basically doing manual labor all day long. It was just constant yelling at, like, boot camp style. So I whispered to one of the girls, like, let's get out of here tonight.
She got away.
We ran through cornfields, through mountains. The guys that worked at the camp grabbed us, and then we got back and they literally just beat the hell out of us in front of everyone, just to let everyone know, if you run away, this is what happens.
She was honestly attracting way too much media attention. They saw her as an out-of-control 16-year-old, and they made the decision to send her to a series of behavioral correction camps.
4:30 in the morning, two large men came into my room and just shook me out of bed and said, do you want to go the easy way or the hard way? And they were holding up handcuffs. And I had no idea what was happening. I thought that I was being kidnapped. I didn't know who these people were. It's hard to believe that any of this is legal. It just blows my mind that there are people like this that exist in the world that could treat children like this and get away with it for so long.
She was sent to Provo Canyon School in Utah, where she says she was abused and described it as one of the most traumatic experiences of her life. She has the same story as the other kids that were sent. Paris was there for almost a year, so because of who she was, you'd think the counselors would be more easier on her. But unfortunately for Paris, that was not the case.
Every day I was just praying that I would wake up from this nightmare, because it was just, it's even hard to describe because it's like something out of a horror film. They would force medication on everyone. One time I was like, I don't want to take these anymore, so I just kind of hid the pills under my tongue and put them in a Kleenex. And then later on someone found out and I got in so much trouble, and they sent me to what they call OBS, where you're just locked in this tiny cell with blood stains on the wall. Just all there is a drain in the floor, there's no windows, and they put the air conditioning as cold as possible, take away all your clothes, and just, they leave you there for hours and hours. To be treated like a criminal when you're just a kid, and the strip searches constantly. As an adult now, I see that as sexual abuse, and these people were abusing their power. And to have male and female staff watching a young girl changing or naked or taking a shower, it was just dehumanizing on all levels.
We were roommates. So when Paris arrived, the staff were more strict and more unfair to her than they were to other people because of her social status. The staff, from the very beginning, hated her. They took away her hair accessories. She had a headband that looked like hair extensions and it was really pretty. And they took that away because they considered that dishonesty, manipulation, attention seeking.
Nothing that Paris had learned growing up on New York's Upper East Side prepared her for what comes next.
She's been tackled multiple times, and then they would drag us to the observation room, a polygonal room with a steel door and a drain in the middle, and they'd leave us in there for hours and hours at a time with a vent, and the vent blew cold air, always. If we were in enough trouble, we could lose our clothes. that it was terrifying and dehumanizing.
It's very interesting about these camps is how hard they work to control the narrative. Kids were not allowed to send letters home without the staff reading them first. If they said anything remotely negative, like "I'm not safe" or "I hate it here," they were forced to rewrite it. Some kids were even punished for trying to be honest, so most of the letters that did make it home were fake happy updates, because that's all the program would allow. So Bhad Bhabie, formerly known as the Catch Me Outside girl, Dr. Phil and her mom made the decision to send her to Turnabout Camp, another ranch in Utah. She was only 13 when she was sent there, and years later, she came forward saying that the experience was traumatic. She talked about being cut off from the outside world, forced to do hard labor, and treated like she didn't matter. According to her, it wasn't about helping her, it was about breaking her down. And the most messed up part was that she didn't fully understand why she was being sent there in the first place. But side note, we don't fully know the dynamics of Bhad Bhabie and her mom's situation. We can all agree that her mom is psychotic in her own sense, but at the same time, I still don't understand how sending your child over state lines is supposed to correct their behavior. If you watch my previous video I made on Bhad Bhabie and her mother, it's always the toxic family dynamics that causes a child to act out. I honestly think that therapy would have been better suited.
Dr. Phil, I am going to give you from now till April 5th to issue an apology, not only to me, but to Hannah and any other child that you sent to Turnabout or any other program like this. And if you don't, I'm gonna handle things my way. Somewhere in the middle of August, I went on the Dr. Phil show, and my mom and my grandma knew they were sending me here. I didn't know I was going. I went school shopping right before, because the school was supposed to start when I got home from LA from doing the show. So part of the whole Dr. Phil show is they send these kids to either Turnabout or these other programs that are also in Utah, but they're all wilderness programs and they're all up. Okay, so Turnabout is in the middle of Escalante, Utah. It's a very, 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 very small town. It's got one gas station, one grocery store. Everybody knows everybody there. You see you're in the middle of nowhere. You know there's nowhere to run. If you try to run out there, they're going to find you, you're going to get in more trouble, or if you do get away, you're going to get eaten by a coyote or something.
But anyways, like many of these programs, Turnabout Ranch had a history of abuse allegations, but because Bhad Bhabie was seen as the bad kid in the media, most people brushed it off. Her story later became part of a larger wave of survivors speaking up. A lot of kids have unfortunately passed away at these camps.
My son loved to be outside, loved camping. He didn't skip school, he didn't do drugs, he lacked confidence. So I looked into wilderness therapy.
So we're just gonna pause right here. You guys don't think it's crazy that she sent her son to a behavior therapy camp because he didn't have any confidence? That alone just doesn't even sound right. Either there's more to the story or she's just being a dramatic parent. He didn't skip school, he had good grades, but he just lacked confidence.
They took children out to the wilderness, taught them all about it, and to gain confidence, that sounded like a good fit.
Once he passed, she was able to obtain a letter he wrote begging her to come home.
Bruises on the back of his leg. He had bruising on his liver and his spleen. Based on the medical examiner's report, the cause of death is homicide. I got a letter 2 days after he died that he had written to me. After a few days here, I wanted to leave, but now it's just kind of fun. I really want to get out of here, so can you please get me out of here? Mom said they don't use physical punishment, but they do. Like on a hike, a person said if you need to take a break, stop for a minute. Well, I did, and I got drugged the rest of the way for 1.5 miles. Please help me. Love lots, and always, Eddie.
I understand the idea of wanting to get your child help, and sending them to a rehab or a therapy program makes sense, but sending them to a literal wilderness where they're forced to hike for miles every day, sleep outside, and survive in the woods, that's not therapy. It's a survival boot camp disguised as healing. These programs cost thousands of dollars. Families pay thousands of dollars for this. The man who started this in the 80s became a multi-millionaire. Parents spent tens of thousands of dollars to send their child to a wilderness camp where they slept outside and ate peanuts and bread. It just honestly doesn't make sense to me. But you guys let me know what you think about these behavior camps and whether or not you believe it's abusive. But make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. Toodles.